Okay, so get this. You send in some research, and it's about feeding seaweed to cows.
Okay.
And it turns out it could actually help reduce their methane emissions. We're talking about some serious potential here, so let's just dive right in and unpack what this study actually found.
Yeah, it really is remarkable research.
Yeah.
Um, we know livestock, especially cattle, are major methane producers, right?
Right.
And methane is a far more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, at least over a 20-year period.
Yeah.
This study was published in PNAS just last month,
Oh.
and it looked at whether a specific type of red seaweed, Asparagopsis taxiformis, could actually change that.
So not just any seaweed from the sushi bar.
Definitely not. This particular seaweed contains a compound called bromoform.
Okay.
And what's fascinating is that bromoform
Yeah.
directly interferes with the way that microbes in a cow's gut produce methane.
Hold on, so it's not like the seaweed is absorbing the methane after it's produced, it's actually stopping it at the source.
Exactly. Imagine a factory assembly line, and the bromoform is jamming up a crucial step in the methane production process.
Wow.
The result, way less methane being burped out by the cows.
That's incredible. But what about the cows themselves? I mean, were they okay eating this stuff?
That's one of the most encouraging parts. The study was done on grazing cattle.
Oh, wow.
So, out on pasture, not in the lab.
Right.
And they found that adding the seaweed to their feed reduced methane emissions by an average of almost 40%,
Mm-hmm.
and without any negative impact on the cow's growth or how much they ate.
Wow, that's a huge reduction. But how does this bromoform actually work? What's going on at the molecular level?
It gets a bit technical, but basically, bromoform targets a specific enzyme
Okay.
that those methane-producing microbes need to function.
Yeah.
Without getting too deep into the chemistry, think of it like this. The bromoform molecule fits into the enzyme like a key in a lock,
Yeah.
but instead of turning it on, it jams it completely.
Oh.
So the microbes can't produce methane as efficiently.
So it's basically sabotaging their methane-making machinery.
Pretty much.
Wow.
And one interesting side effect is that it actually leads to an increase in hydrogen gas emissions.
Wait, hydrogen, isn't that a greenhouse gas too?
It is, but it has a much shorter lifespan in the atmosphere compared to methane.
Okay.
And it might be possible to capture and use that hydrogen for other purposes down the line.
Okay, so there's still a lot to figure out, but even if it's not a perfect solution, this research seems like a big deal, right?
Absolutely. It's a major step forward in figuring out how to make livestock production more sustainable,
Yeah.
and it fits into a larger movement
Okay.
towards what's called climate-smart agriculture. This basically means finding ways to produce food while minimizing our environmental impact.
I like that, climate-smart agriculture.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that bigger picture then. What are some of the other potential benefits of this seaweed approach?
Well, for one thing, there's the potential for increased feed efficiency. This means the cows could get more nutrients out of the same amount of food,
Right.
which is good for both the farmer and the environment.
Yeah.
And then there's the fact that seaweed itself actually absorbs carbon dioxide as it grows.
So it's like a double whammy,
Yeah,
reducing methane from the cows and pulling carbon out of the atmosphere.
exactly.
That's great.
There's even research looking into how seaweed farming could help restore coastal ecosystems and create new economic opportunities.
This is all sounding pretty amazing, but I'm guessing there are some challenges too, right?
Of course, there are always challenges when it comes to scaling up a new technology.
Right.
And in this case, we need to figure out how to produce and distribute this specific type of seaweed on a massive scale without harming the ocean.
And that's not even getting into whether people will actually want to buy seaweed-fed beef.
Right. Consumer acceptance is a big one.
Yeah.
And then there are questions about how this strategy compares to other methods for reducing methane from livestock.
Okay, so a lot more to explore, but before we get into those challenges,
Yeah.
I want to go back to the study itself.
Good idea. Let's break down some of the key details. The study was conducted at UC Davis, and they used a herd of Wagyu Angus crossbred steers,
Oh, fancy.
a premium breed. They carefully measured the methane emissions
Yeah.
using a special system called green feed,
Okay.
which can monitor gases produced by the cows in real time.
So they could see exactly how much methane the cows were burping out before and after eating the seaweed.
That's right.
That's so cool. And the results were pretty clear.
Yeah.
But before we get into those specifics, let's take a quick break and we'll come right back to break down those numbers and talk about the implications.
Picking up where we left off, let's zoom in on some of the specifics from that UC Davis study.
Okay.
Remember they used Wagyu Angus crossbred steers.
Oh, fancy. So,
Yeah.
not your average farm animal.
Yeah, not your average steer.
Does that...
Wagyu beef is known for its marbling
Right.
and that high price tag.
I was going to say, does that make a difference for the research?
It definitely adds another layer of relevance.
Okay.
If this seaweed works for a premium breed,
Yeah.
it's a stronger signal for the broader beef industry.
Right.
And the study itself was really well designed.
Yeah.
They carefully measured the methane emissions using a system called green feed,
Okay.
which allows for real-time monitoring.
So like a breathalyzer for cows?
Kind of.
Yeah.
It's a non-invasive technology
Oh, wow.
that encourages the cows to eat from a special feeding station
Okay.
where their breath is analyzed for methane,
Gotcha.
carbon dioxide,
Okay.
and even hydrogen.
Oh, wow. So it can measure all those gases?
Researchers can track changes
Yeah.
in gas emissions as the cows consume the seaweed.
Okay. So no poking and prodding the cows to get those measurements.
Right.
That's clever. But what about the seaweed itself? Were the cows just munching on seaweed all day long?
Not quite. The seaweed was incorporated into pellets,
Oh, okay.
and the steers in the treatment group received a carefully measured dose of bromoform daily.
Gotcha.
Wasn't a huge amount, just enough to have that methane-inhibiting effect.
So you're telling me a tiny bit of seaweed can make a big difference in a cow's digestion?
It really is.
That's fascinating.
And remember, we
Yeah.
talked about how the study found almost a 40% reduction in methane emissions.
Right. That's amazing.
Well, there's another encouraging finding from the study. No negative effects on the cow's growth or appetite were observed.
So they were happy and healthy, just burping out less methane.
That's the idea. In fact, there were even hints that the cows eating the seaweed might have gained weight a little faster,
Oh, wow.
although more research is needed to confirm that.
Okay, that's interesting.
And intriguingly, they also found that carbon dioxide production decreased slightly in the seaweed group.
So less methane, less carbon dioxide.
Yeah,
That's 2 major greenhouse gases down.
exactly.
But what about that hydrogen increase we talked about? Should we be concerned about that?
It's a valid question.
Yeah.
It's true that hydrogen is a greenhouse gas,
Right.
but it has a much shorter lifespan in the atmosphere
Okay.
compared to methane.
Okay.
Plus, researchers are actively working on capturing and utilizing that excess hydrogen, potentially turning it into a valuable fuel source.
Exactly.
Okay, so potentially turning a problem into a solution.
Exactly.
I like the way this is shaping up, but I'm also remembering the challenges we discussed earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Scaling up production,
Yeah.
ensuring sustainability, winning over consumers.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we're just scratching the surface here.
You're absolutely right. This research is incredibly promising, but there's still a lot of work to be done before seaweed-fed beef becomes a mainstream reality.
So where do we go from here? What are the next steps in making this a viable solution?
Well, on the production side, we need to invest in research and development to optimize seaweed farming techniques.
Okay.
We need to figure out how to grow this specific type of seaweed efficiently and sustainably at a scale that can meet the demand.
I imagine that's going to require a lot of collaboration, definitely.
Marine biologists, farmers, engineers, maybe even economists
Yeah.
to figure out the financial side of things.
It's a complex challenge that requires a multidisciplinary approach.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole consumer side of the equation.
Right, getting people on board with the idea of seaweed-fed beef.
Yeah,
How do we do that? I mean, do you think labeling could play a role?
definitely. Clear and informative labeling could help consumers understand the environmental benefits of choosing seaweed-fed beef. Imagine seeing labels like low methane beef
Right.
or climate-friendly beef at the grocery store.
Okay, I could see that working. But what about taste? Does seaweed affect the flavor of the beef?
That's a question researchers are still exploring.
Okay.
Early indications suggest that it doesn't have a significant impact on the taste,
Okay.
but more research is needed to confirm that.
And even if the taste is fine, are people going to be willing to pay more for seaweed-fed beef?
That's another key question. It's likely that seaweed-fed beef will come with a price premium, at least initially.
Right.
Consumers are increasingly willing to pay more for sustainable products.
Yeah.
But there's a limit.
Yeah, of course.
Finding that sweet spot in terms of pricing will be crucial for widespread adoption.
So a lot of moving pieces here, from science and technology to economics and consumer behavior.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a whole new industry waiting to be built around seaweed farming.
It certainly has that potential.
Wow.
And if we do it right, it could be a win-win-win.
Yeah.
Good for the environment, good for the economy, and good for the cows themselves.
Okay, I'm sold. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we still need to address the elephant in the room, or should I say, the cow in the pasture. What about the ethical implications of all this? We'll tackle that and some final thoughts on the future of a sustainable food in the last part of our deep dive. Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle that elephant in the pasture.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about changing the way we produce food on a global scale, there are always those ethical considerations. So let's try to unpack some of those.
Yeah.
One concern I've heard is that, focusing on seaweed as a solution might distract from other efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
Maybe even give the beef industry like a free pass to continue business as usual.
I understand that concern.
Yeah.
It's crucial to emphasize that this is not a magic bullet.
Right.
Seaweed is just one tool in our toolbox.
Right.
And it shouldn't overshadow the need for broader systemic change.
So it's not about replacing other solutions.
Right.
It's about adding another layer of innovation to the mix.
Exactly. We still need to work on reducing overall meat consumption,
Yeah.
transitioning to renewable energy sources,
Right.
and implementing more sustainable agricultural practices across the board.
Okay, so seaweed is part of a bigger picture, not a standalone solution.
Right.
But even if it's just one piece of the puzzle, it could still make a significant contribution, right?
Absolutely. Every bit helps. And if this technology can help reduce methane emissions from livestock even by a fraction, that's a step in the right direction.
What about the cows themselves? Some people might worry about the welfare implications of
Right.
changing their diet in such a dramatic way.
It's a valid point.
Yeah.
But remember, the research we've discussed indicates that the seaweed doesn't seem to have any adverse effects on the cow's health or well-being.
Right.
In fact, some studies suggest it might even have some positive nutritional benefits.
And they seem to like the taste. I mean, we don't want to be forcing cows to eat something they find disgusting.
Right, palatability is important.
Yeah.
But from what we've seen so far, the seaweed doesn't seem to be a problem for them.
Okay, that's reassuring. But it sounds like we're still in the early stages of understanding all the potential implications, both positive and negative. What are some of the key questions we still need to answer?
Well, one is the long-term impact on the cows themselves.
Okay.
We have data showing that the seaweed is safe in the short term. But we need more research to understand the effects over a cow's entire lifespan.
And what about the environmental impact of seaweed farming itself? We talked about the potential benefits for the ocean.
Right.
But are there any risks involved?
Definitely. Like any form of agriculture, seaweed farming has to be managed carefully to avoid negative consequences.
Right.
We need to make sure it's done in a way that doesn't disrupt delicate marine ecosystems
Yeah.
or lead to the introduction of invasive species.
So a lot of research and careful planning are needed to ensure that seaweed farming is truly sustainable.
Exactly. And it's not just about the science.
Right.
We also need to consider the social and economic impacts. For example, how will seaweed farming affect coastal communities?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Will it create new jobs and opportunities?
Right.
Or will it displace existing fisheries or other industries?
It sounds like there's a whole web of interconnected issues here.
Yeah.
And we need to approach it with a holistic perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to have open and honest conversations about the potential benefits and risks of this technology.
Yeah.
We need to involve scientists, farmers, consumers, policymakers, everyone who might be affected.
So a collaborative approach is key. But ultimately, isn't it up to consumers to decide whether they're willing to embrace seaweed-fed beef? I mean, if people aren't buying it,
Yeah,
the market won't support it.
that's right. Consumer demand will ultimately drive the success or failure of this technology.
Yeah.
And that's why education and transparency are so important.
Right.
We need to give consumers the information they need to make informed choices.
It seems like there's a huge opportunity here to not only reduce the environmental impact of beef production, but also to engage consumers in a conversation about the future of food.
Yeah.
Maybe this could even be a catalyst for a broader shift towards more sustainable diets and agricultural practices.
I certainly hope so. It's an exciting time to be working in this field.
Well, this has been an incredible journey.
Yeah, it has.
We've gone from like a single research study to a whole new vision of what a sustainable food system could look like.
It's amazing.
And I think the key takeaway here is that innovation can come from unexpected places.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that nature holds incredible solutions if we're willing to look for them.
So to our listener who sent in that initial research paper,
Yeah.
thank you for sparking this fascinating deep dive.
It's been great.
And to all our listeners, keep those questions coming.
Yes.
Who knows what amazing discoveries we'll uncover together next.
Exactly.
Until then, keep exploring the world with curiosity and an open mind.